welcome everyone to this conversation about the making of a collaborative project called Home City Spaces of Care, Networks of Solidarity and Belonging for Refugees and Asylum Seekers in London and Beyond, funded by British Academy Wolfson Fellowship for 3 years. The project creatively and critically explores themes of care, solidarity, belonging and resistance in the city, with a group of refugees and people seeking asylum living in London. I'm Olivia Sheringham, Principal Investigator for the project and a geographer based at Birkbeck University. I work on questions relating to home, migration, solidarity and cities, and the role of the arts for engaging with and producing knowledge about these themes. I'm joined here today by collaborators on the project, Kate Duffy-Syedi and Abel Atsede from Phosphoros Theatre, a refugee theatre company that makes nationally touring and socially engaged performance with, for and by refugees and people seeking asylum.
Hi, it's really nice to be here.
Hello.
Hi. And also joining me in this conversation are collaborators Helen Taylor and Pamela from Stories and Supper, a Walthamstow-based charity that hosts regular meetups, including workshops and allotment sessions, with refugees, people seeking asylum and local residents.
Hi, thanks for inviting us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to invite us.
We're about midway through the creative part of this project, so the practical part. And the aim of our discussion today is to present our reflections on the process so far, which we hope should be insightful for anyone wanting to embark on a creative and collaborative project, or whose research or creative practice is related to similar themes. And I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves more fully in a moment and ask some questions. But I first wanted to introduce the project to provide a bit of context and background to our chat. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, Pamela, but the project was actually inspired by a conversation that you and me had a few years ago, sitting on a bench in Tavistock Square, not far from where we are sitting right now. And you were describing your weekly routine. And I was really struck by the many different places and activities that you mentioned that in various ways involved you either giving or receiving some form of care. So you talked about supporting friends, going to choir, going to the allotment, volunteering for a charity, going to English classes. And it made me think about these kind of hidden networks of care that are so vital to sustaining our cities and our societies, yet which are so invisibilised and undervalued. And especially so in the context of the hostile migration regime in the UK and years of austerity and the retrenchment of public services. So, inspired by this, I wanted to develop a project in collaboration with grassroots organisations and people with lived experience of the asylum system to explore these networks in more depth in order to better understand them and to contribute to changing and resisting dominant hostile migration narratives. Do you remember that conversation, Pamela?
Yes, I do remember that conversation, Olivia. This is the opportunity to tell you that I really enjoy to have that chat with you because you approached me as a friend. And also because I knew you a couple of years ago in Stories and Supper, so I was open up to speak to you freely. So yes, I do remember, and I was so pleased to share all this with you.
Well, it inspired this project that we're all here together talking about today. And a big part of this project has involved a series of creative workshops and activities to find ways to expand understandings of what care is and where care happens, and what the limits of care are, and how we can imagine and build collective care in our communities, in our cities, and in our societies more widely. And I'd been lucky enough to work with both Stories and Supper and Phosphoros before, both organisations for whom care and creativity are key aspects of their work. So it was fantastic to develop this project in collaboration. Helen and Kate, I wonder if each of you could introduce yourselves and your organisations and how you came to be involved in this Creating Cities of Care project, which is what it's come to be called.
Hi, my name's Helen Taylor and I'm the director of Stories and Supper. We're an organisation that's been working for about 8 years in East London, in Walthamstow. And our work brings together refugees, people seeking asylum and local residents over food, stories, horticulture, in spaces of welcome and encounter to kind of counter some of the impacts of the hostile environment. And my background, I also have a background in academia. I did a PhD about the meaning of home for Cypriot refugees in London. So this kind of links really nicely. This project there's lots of echoes, how people recreate home in a new place, and how they build those networks of care is something that was relevant to my PhD as well. And it's been really great to have this opportunity to collaborate with Phosphoros again and to collaborate with you, Olivia. We've worked together a number of times on other projects. It's really nice to kind of build those relationships and to see where the kind of crossovers are in our work. That's been very valuable. And I think the idea of care is always kind of under the surface, maybe, in the work that Stories and Supper do. We create these spaces of care, but it's sort of quiet in a way. It's not something we talk about. So this has been really nice to actually explore that in more depth and look at what care really means and what it really means to build a caring society in the current climate.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what's kind of inspired these spaces of care within the practice of organisations like Stories and Supper, and then thinking of that more widely. And Kate, I wonder if you could talk a bit about Phosphoros and yourself.
So I'm Kate Duffy-Syedi. I'm one of the artistic directors of Phosphoros, and we're in our 10th year now, and we create theatre projects and performance projects with refugees and asylum seekers aged 16 to 25, and almost all of our members came to the UK as unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, so that's our kind of specific focus. And we create nationally touring theatre productions that are made with and performed by refugee actors, and then produce community drama projects as well. And so in all of that work, it's careful, and we think about care all the time, and it's kind of at the core of all of the work that we do and the impact of that work as well. And kind of in collaboration with Phosphoros, I did a PhD that in kind of applied theatre that looks at how performance making with refugee young people can explore and expose experiences of those kind of quiet care networks that you've mentioned, but also how performance can be a form of care itself. And that's that part of it, that performance can care, is what I think is really interesting about this project, because we're exploring how those spaces that we create every week, and how the food aspect of it, and kind of being really thoughtful about where we're placing those workshops, how that can become a kind of embodied experience of care in itself. So yeah, all of those various musings on care kind of got us to reignite a long-standing relationship with Stories and Supper as well.
Thanks, Kate. That's great, and that's really at the core of this, thinking about care as both a sort of subject, or something that's both absent and present, but also thinking about care as kind of method. I want to turn now to you, Abel, and ask you to introduce yourself and talk a bit about how you came to be involved in this project and how the themes speak to you.
Thank you. I'm Abel. I'm a performer, community engagement assistant at Phosphoros, and I also facilitate drama workshops for refugees and asylum seekers in London. Because of most of Phosphoros' work, as Kate mentioned, it has that care sense, and in most of our works with young people, we do talk about creating belonging and having that relationship and caring for each other and bringing that further in a big group. I haven't worked with mixed group before, and I think that made me very invested in doing the workshops. And also the theme of care really speaks to me because I'm a caregiver, and being in the system and having lots of relationships with professionals and creating that not care environment, maybe thinking about that made me think more about what is the topic of care. And yeah, I was really invested in that.
Thanks, Abel. That's really interesting, thinking about where the term care is used in contexts which are often very uncaring.
Yeah, there's something that we've talked about a bit about that experience of this word being so attached to your experiences of being in care and then a care leaver, and that word having that kind of institutional labelling attached to it. And so having an opportunity in a creative space to redefine care and reimagine it and find our own definitions for it. I imagine that for you as an artist, practitioner, that's been really interesting, and I imagine that that's extended to the members of the group as well.
It gave me like a kind of like force to, because I think being in process of that, I think giving care in what I do, like artistically, was very like helpful even for me and helping my community.
Oh, thanks, Abel. Yeah, that's something that I want to talk about a bit more later in terms of this what does creative practice do that other forms might not. But before I do, I just wanted to turn to you, Pamela. And as we mentioned, the whole project was in many ways inspired by you and by that conversation that we had. And I wonder if you could introduce yourself and then talk a bit about how you feel the project might be capturing some of these things, those kind of networks of care that we talked about.
Yes, I'm Pamela, and thank you very much for being inspired by me talking. So I can see that I wasn't just talking, but someone was listening in what I was saying. It's good that you have been inspired by me and you wanted to develop more this project. And I feel this is a value things to offer refugee and asylum seeker, because sometimes there is a barrier that sometimes people don't understand. People can be stopped to go somewhere because of the language. Just imagine being in a country, you don't speak the language, you feel blind. So you will need someone to tell you where place is. Imagine that you speak, I don't know, Arabic, and you want to go, I don't know, to your GP. So how can you do that if you don't have anyone to tell you where the way is? About the project, it is a good thing because you feel like it's not just about taking about care, but we explore care in so many ways. If I have to give an example, when we start, sometimes we have to start with a game. To be honest, when I started with Story and Supper, the good things that I really, really enjoy, it was the game. So it's the way that you feel like a child again. So it's like a warm up. You warm yourself up and then you're going to do what is next. So you feel your mind is prepared to do the next thing. I think for people who have been a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, it is important to be relaxed and feel that people are there to not just to, I wanted to say to play, but actually it's not to play, but it's more to make people feel more relaxed and do whatever they're going to do. In terms of care, I was using my own experience because what I've been through, it's being an asylum seeker, I know today to win my case. So it takes time, but the good thing was I also had people around me who helped me in the same way that I wanted also to help others because I feel what they are feeling, because I know what it is. It's not just to talk to people. When someone approach you and start talking to you, you feel value. You feel like this person is caring about you. So that's why I was more open and I'm pleased to help other people if I can.
Oh, thank you, Pamela. Yeah, that's absolutely what came out in that conversation that we had, this both feeling support from others in terms of people supporting you with language, with going to the GP, but also the support that you were giving others and still very much do. And in these workshops, that really comes out as well. And yeah, thanks for talking about the games, which I think is something that we all really love. And it feels like it's quite a big part of this, the relationship between care and play, I think is an important one. So we've delivered a series of creative workshops that we've all mentioned with a group of refugees and people seeking asylum. And these have been co-designed and co-facilitated by the five of us based on the themes of the project. And we're also going on a project residential next weekend, which will be a weekend of creativity, making, crafting, cooking and thinking about care, and a kind of extension of what we've done so far. And we're going to hopefully make a film over the weekend and also create some collective resources to take forward from the project. But Abel, thinking back perhaps, I wonder if you could talk us through how the workshops have worked so far and perhaps what your highlight has been.
I would say, I mentioned it before, I haven't worked with the mix of age group, and in Phosphoros they're usually young, and in Stories and Supper it's a mixed group with like variety of ages. And I really saw that they created a connection, and it worked really well in the workshops where they care for each other, where they look after each other, they supported each other. And I think my favorite workshop, I would say, is the dance workshop we did. And I wasn't expecting everyone will get involved in those specific dances. And they were so happy to share their traditional dances and taught us. And everyone was getting involved. And they were so happy, and they've shared even like names of the dance. And I think them sharing that and being themselves in that space felt like they are free here, and they created a safe space to be each other. And bringing their like energy and freedom to the room was very like colorful, I would say. And yeah, I really enjoyed that specifically. And also like lunchtime is the time where like everyone just sit down and kind of like reflect on the sessions, what we did. And yeah, those times are great as well.
Thanks, Abel. Yeah, I absolutely loved that dance workshop too. And there was a real sense of it was quite unexpected, but people who originally said they probably wouldn't dance were kind of in the middle of the room, and there was a real sense of the dance kind of taking care, a bit like you were saying about performance taking care. So yeah, thanks.
I think that's really important what Abel and Pamela have both said about these kind of silliness, the playing the games, and also the kind of joy that people felt in the dance. And I think we've talked sometimes about this idea of radical joy, that it seems silly or it seems like you're just having fun, but it is actually a radical act to say, well, we aren't going to kind of recreate these kind of hostile spaces. We're going to create spaces where people can laugh together and can care for each other and have fun and express joy. And that in itself is an act of resistance. So I think that's kind of those things being the things that people enjoy the most, the games and the dancing, it sort of speaks to that in a way, because it is like, how do we create those spaces where people don't necessarily have to be dwelling on their asylum case or on their kind of like their mental health, but they can find moments of joy in sort of maybe a difficult day.
Something to add there that I think is really wonderful about this project as well is that it's sort of sowing seeds or kind of putting some roots down or building on roots and existing practices that are happening from Phosphoros and Stories and Supper. So criticism that is directed often at kind of community embedded projects like this is that artists and practitioners are kind of parachuting in, delivering a short-term thing, or researchers, and then leaving. And that's absolutely not what's happening here, because this project has been designed by Olivia so carefully with this collaboration in mind, that when the research finishes, those connections won't, and the connection between our organisations won't either. And so there are members of both Phosphoros and Stories and Supper who are attending the groups, who also attend other activities, but then members of both of those that have then enrolled in other parts of our work that they wouldn't have known about unless they had met us in the project. And so that feels like a really positive sort of secondary outcome that hasn't fully yet happened because the project is still ongoing. But I think that's worth mentioning, that there's a kind of embeddedness there as well.
Thanks, Kate. So I wanted to turn to you again, actually, Kate, because a key part of the design of this project was to explore care through creative practice, using creativity, dance, drama, poetry, embroidery, cooking, rather than through interviews or other more kind of conventional social science methodologies. Kate, I know this is something that is key to how you approach your research, and you've talked about your PhD and your current and I know you're currently doing a project. I wonder if you could talk a bit about what you feel is the value of the creative process for exploring these things.
Yeah, I mean, as a practice researcher, this is like completely my wheelhouse, completely what really excites me about research. Because, yeah, my PhD, the other projects I'm doing now, we're not using creative methods and drama as a means to finding out something later, or as a way into then doing a focus group or then doing an interview. The practice is the thing, the creativity and the drama and the theatre in that space. That is the research, and that holds as much weight as other forms of kind of engaging with participants. So it's really exciting that from a social sciences perspective, that is being really valued in this project. I mean, Helen mentioned this idea of hostile spaces, and I do think that often in interview settings, not all the time, of course, but there is a kind of echo of some of the more hostile processes of being interviewed for asylum seekers that is reminiscent of asylum interviews or age disputes, hostile meetings with social services, whereas taking a creative route means that we are discovering stories and knowledge and narratives that might not emerge otherwise. So what can we discover about care through dance? What can we discover about care through touch, through eye contact, through voice, through cooking together? What do we learn about care over the cooking pot? I think all of those questions are really exciting to consider.
And how does this kind of challenge what we thought care might mean, challenge and expand? And Helen, we've talked before about how academics tend to talk about methods, and I'm doing quotes there. But what we're doing here and in the past is in many ways no different to what Stories and Supper and Phosphoros do already. And Kate, you've touched on this. But I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you feel this project is similar or different to what creative methods might do for exploring a theme like the theme of care.
Yeah, I think to echo what Kate says, really, that this idea that often, there's a creative turn in academic research, and I'm not that immersed in academic research anymore, but kind of there has been a creative turn, but it has almost been a kind of an extractive thing in a way, like let's use narrative or let's use drama or let's use one of these methods because that's a different way of getting our data, and our data might be richer. But it's not actually about kind of how knowledge is created and how the process itself enriches the people who are taking part in the process, how they can feed into that process of creativity, how it improves their lives, for example. So I think it's really important that this idea of the process, rather than the kind of what comes out of it or the data that comes out of it, it's this idea that together we're creating something. So in this project, the five of us as facilitators have all been learning from each other. We know each other to greater or lesser degrees already, but we've been learning from each other, and that's been like a really beautiful part of the process, how we've learned from each other and worked together with our different kind of lived experiences and academic experiences and creative experiences. And I think also as we've run the workshops, the things that other people have brought to them, the participants have brought to them, and what's emerged out of that process is what's valuable as it happens in a way. So it's much harder to quantify. It's much harder to write down. It's much harder to hand in at the end of your research project. It's harder. It's very nebulous, and I think that's often why funders don't like things like this, and they don't necessarily like the work that Stories and Supper might do, or because it's like, where are the concrete outcomes? But I think it's quite important to sort of challenge, to come up against funders and academia and say, like, no, this has a value in itself. And, as Kate said about performance as a form of care, all these creative activities that we've been doing, whether it's the games or the dance or the embroidery or mapping with our bodies, they are acts of care in and of that moment while we're in the workshop together, as well as having ripples outside that workshop in our own lives and in the lives of the participants. So yeah, I think it is very much how Stories and Supper has always worked, that we kind of, the process is what's important. It's that being together, holding that space for people to be together and to share, to take part in creative activities, and to have that space to sort of imagine other futures together.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial, to think about the process rather than the outcome. And again, that's not really necessarily what funders or certainly the academic system values. But I think projects like this and what the work of Stories and Supper and Phosphoros, I think that's what they're kind of pushing back against, and actually the process is extremely valuable. But having a project around the theme of care is not necessarily original, particularly at the moment, as it seems that this word care is everywhere. And lots of people talk about a crisis of care, and particularly in the wake of the pandemic. But for lots of people, this crisis of care is nothing new. People's lives have been absolutely characterised by an absence of care. And following the pandemic, a group of scholars and activists in the UK brought out something which they called a care manifesto, in which they called for care to be reimagined as the organising principle in every dimension and at every scale of life. And I'm quoting there. And there's been a massive proliferation of work and care across the arts and social sciences. I think we've probably all come across this word quite a lot in different contexts, and other disciplines and discourses. But Abel and Pamela, I just wanted to ask both of you what you think about this concept and this term care, and whether you think it's a useful one to explore in work with people with lived experience of the asylum system, and what is in many ways a failure of government systems to care.
Yeah, I think it's very important to kind of like bring the theme of care for people who are like went through the asylum system, and bringing that sense of like caring in a different way that they receive in organizations or also like professionals and in the system, and showing that, or like by holding the space of care in a different way, we can really like foster it's like a ripple effect of care, and all participants can really feel that and also share that outside in their life. Because sometimes in being in the system that is uncaring, from claiming asylum to going to like higher education and not feeling that sense of care could be from social workers or any other professionals. I think it's good to kind of like bringing that sense of care in very creative way where participants can enjoy and also feel that hope, and letting them know that we can stand together and get the support from our surroundings, and not only seeing the very closed side of the professionals that is uncaring. Yeah.
Thinking about care sort of outside these institutional structures. What about you, Pamela?
Yes, I agree with you, Abel, what you just said, because I feel if you've been through something and you are an example. You can show what you've been through. You can be this person who's going to motivate the other people who are scared, who are losing hope, like you just said, because you are there to say that I've been through this and this is me now. So I can do other things. I can learn other things. I can study again. I can opt for my life, my future. So it is important to have people who've been through this, because it shows that this person could give other people hope. And I'm sure that if we have those people around us, that would be a good thing, because they can testify that there is other things that you can do. Don't just think about the big things to do, because sometimes we think that I have to do a big thing because, probably I waited a long time, so I feel like I'm not useful. I can't do things anymore. But there is other things that you can do, and you can enjoy it. You can learn how to swim. Sometimes you don't need the English, but you need like what we do in Story and Supper. We do art. We have people who their English is just, they can just not talk properly English, but they can write a poem. You will be surprised how people are developing themselves. So it is important, because everyone needs care, because everyone needs someone to care about. This is important. As long as someone is there to tell you that I can help you, I'm concerned about you. So you are open and you can let yourself go. So this is the most important, because like I just explained, we all need care. The care is not just it's about all kind of care. We all need it.
I was struck by something that you said, Olivia, when you were talking about the kind of crisis of care and this idea of the pandemic. And I think there was a lot of anger at the time of the pandemic that a lot of the gaps were being filled by kind of grassroots organisations, by community groups that sprung up, by mutual aid, by people sewing scrubs. And I think in a way that's similar with the asylum system, that it isn't a caring system. It hasn't been a caring system for a long time. And I think, in a way, there is an underlying anger that society is having to do that caring work that isn't being done by society, by the structures of society, by sort of, the state structures. And I think I was really struck by you talking about being a care leaver, Abel, because it's a really weird term when you think about it, to say that you're leaving care as if like nobody's going to care for you anymore. Yeah. And I think it's the fact that you've been through both the care system as a young person and through the asylum system, both of which are supposed to be caring people who are in difficult situations, and neither of which are particularly caring a lot of the time. And I think, we are in that situation where, charities, organisations like ours are kind of trying to build those networks of care because they've been absent. And, it's important that we carry on doing that and creating those networks of care with people with lived experience, as you say, Pamela. But there's underlying a sort of like that I have this sort of seed of anger that this isn't being done by the structures that are meant to care. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that kind of relates to my next question. And I was thinking about a lot of the kind of critical engagements with care. There's an emphasis on this idea of care, or sort of more recent engagements with care, as care as something political, not as something soft and fuzzy or sympathetic, but actually something that can be resistant and potentially radical. I know this is something that we've talked about in our discussions and we've written about, but I wonder if you felt that this is something emerging through the workshops. So I suppose my question is about whether there's a sense, I think we've kind of touched on this already, but whether there's a sense that the workshops are in some way resisting these discourses of care that are actually not necessarily caring, or they're caring in a kind of hierarchical way where there's a caregiver who's sort of up here and a care recipient who's somehow passive. What are we doing in the workshops that is maybe different to that?
I mean, this doesn't quite answer that immediately, but I think we'll get there. Something that feels really important to make clear here is that in the sessions, when we're talking about experiences of care in the city and experiences of the asylum system, the members of the group are not talking about distant past or about things that happened years ago. They might sometimes be, but these experiences are also very live and very close to the surface. And that also extends to members of our team as well. And that kind of liveness and presence of what it means to be living in precarious circumstances in a state-sanctioned hostile environment, talking about that and creatively expressing that and verbalizing that every week, I think in itself is a radical act and is an act of resistance, that these things are happening and they're being talked about as they happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that, for someone might turn up to the workshop having received a letter from the Home Office that morning, and they come to the workshop and they are experiencing this very different kind of space. There's something that that as you say is very sort of pertinent. It's not something we're looking back on. It's not something that we're just talking about in the abstract, but it's something that is very, very real.
Yeah, that feels very present in the space, and is also something that, of course, causes some challenges, which we'll talk about later. But that closeness, that real immediate relevance and presence of the hostile environment outside of the space, that presence, I think, is felt in different ways.
And I think that's why that solidarity is really important, isn't it? For those of us that don't have that lived experience, I think kind of standing with people who are going through those experiences is a really important part of the project, I think.
And I think I'm glad that they understood, or they know that the care will be there, and they are very open to share their struggles with us and some of the participants, and they have they also share what they feel after the session, which is great. And I just want to share that.
Yeah. But also I think what's been quite powerful is people both feeling hopefully safe to share, but also to not share if they don't want to. And that's what the power of kind of using creativity and the imagination, that we're also being silly and we're also creating things that might mean that people don't feel they have to share anything that feels uncomfortable. And I think that's the power of the creative process and using our imagination. And also we're in lots of ways, we're imagining perhaps what a caring society might look like beyond those very immediate hostilities that people.
Yeah, I think the ability to work in fiction and in the imaginary is really key. And that's where this project is absolutely not about kind of excavating and mining truths and facts. That we're thinking about emotional truth and about people's feelings and perspectives on the issues that are happening in their lives. But the creative method means that, we are also thinking about those things in abstract ways.
Sometimes it's also a call may make someone feel also good after being to the home office and report, and to find out how the person is, how are you feeling. Those simple questions may make a big difference to the person.
In designing these workshops, we've drawn links between care and creativity, and we've talked about this a bit today, and in lots of ways inspired by the work of people like James Thompson, who's an applied theatre practitioner and scholar, who talks about this idea of the aesthetics of care. So how care itself is an artful practice, but also how art can be a form of care. And this is definitely something that's come out in our discussion, and also during our workshops. But I thought we could finish, and we've also touched upon this, but I thought we could finish by talking about some of the challenges that we've encountered in these workshops, things that maybe haven't gone quite as planned.
I mean, I think a lot of the challenges we've faced are the challenges that we would always face in Stories in Supper, and I'm sure the same challenges that Phosphoros face as well, to do with, when people are living in precarious situations, to do with their status or to do with their housing, then it's not always easy to say we're meeting Thursday at 11 o'clock and we want you to be on time, although we would like people to be on time. Obviously, sometimes people have had bad news from the Home Office. They might have had bad news from their family. They might have, been thrown out of their house that day. So there's kind of lots of things that can disrupt kind of people's willingness to come and take part in the session. So I think it's a challenge to be open to that and to understand the reasons why people can't make it, as well as trying to hold the integrity of the space and the workshops and preserve that kind of time to be a time where we can develop the work. So I think it's kind of getting that balance between the fact that we need the workshops to happen. They're going to happen at this time on this day in this location, but there might be reasons, perfectly valid reasons in people's lives that stop them getting there on a particular day.
Yes, as Helen just mentioned, when you have to move again and again, it may feel difficult for the person to keep coming in the workshop, because imagine you don't have a place to stay. Mm-hmm. How can you come to a workshop? So you want to make sure that you have a place to stay, you feel comfortable, and you have your you can do other things, but just going to the workshop, it will make you feel, even though if you have to try, it's difficult. Mentally, it's difficult for the person. Mm. So you need to be stable. And that's the thing. Even though the care of the project is so interesting for you, but you don't feel comfortable. You don't feel like you're going, even though if you have to be there, you are not present at that moment. Yeah. Because how can you cope with that? Mm. And all the time, you don't know where you are going. There is always a question mark. So it is complicated.
Similarly, on this point about actually getting into the space, absolutely, this is something that Phosphoros is up against every week, really, because of all of the factors that Helen mentioned. But something else to say is that because of the nature of the group, that it's not an ESOL class, it's not something that you have to make a firm commitment to, and if you don't come, you can't come back. It's in the daytime, which suits lots of people. So there's a few parts of that project that might sit a little bit differently to some other activities. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have people coming in from quite far. We've got people scattered all over London and outside as well. There's something really meaningful in that even if people are travelling kind of an hour and a half, they want to be present with us in that space and come together. But there's a lot of labour involved in getting there, and that can be tricky sometimes. And another thing I think is a challenge is that, as I mentioned before, the closeness of these issues for some members of the group is very present and at the surface. And some people really want to talk about those experiences where they've had maybe a lacking of care, and then now they've got a lovely neighbour who's doing something really lovely for them. But not everybody has that now, because they're living in asylum hotel accommodation and they don't have community in that space. So sometimes those differences in the group also feel quite stark.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you all for this discussion. I just wanted us to finish by talking about our residential, which is our sort of final workshop or weekend workshop, which we're going next week into the countryside. I wondered if each of you could perhaps talk about what you're most looking forward to in the residential, or what you feel it's going to bring to the project.
I think it's about spending time together for, I think, longer period of time together, and I think creating lots of physical and also creative stuff, and just spending time. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to know them, and I think we usually meet like for 2 hours, but now I think spending time more together. I'm really looking forward to that.
Great, yeah.
I'm really looking forward to spending time outside and discovering what that does to our creative practice, how that impacts how we're using dance. And some people have talked about singing and bringing instruments. So I'm imagining campfires and singing. We've also got some members of the group who are very new to the UK and haven't ventured out of London that much. So the opportunity for it's a holiday, really, I think is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm really looking forward to is the chance for us to cook together, because Stories and Supper is something we always make sure there's space for us to eat together, and we do sometimes host events where we'll cook and we'll sort of showcase some of the food from members of our group. So I think there's something really lovely about cooking food together and eating together as an act of care, as an act of love towards the people that you're feeding. And I think it'll be really nice just to kind of share that laughter in the kitchen and share food together in a different space.
Actually, is what I wanted to say, Helen. I wanted to say that on the first day, I'm looking to cook some dal that I learned from a recipe to a friend. So I'm so excited to share that with you.
Oh, wow, I'm looking forward to that as well. But definitely food has been something that's come up a lot in lots of the discussions that we've had in the workshops, and work that we've done with images that we associate with care. Or yeah, it'll be good to bring that even more into our weekend together. So thank you all so much for this discussion, and to you listeners for engaging with it. We hope you found it insightful in some way. You can find out more about our project through the Stories and Supper website or through my page on the Birkbeck site. And there are links to these and other things we've mentioned in the podcast notes. And we'll also be sharing some of our resources and outputs, which I'm saying in inverted commas because we're also even more invested in the process, from the project in the coming months. So watch this space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.